Hi all, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kwacinda Larice, your spirit-led transformation coach. Today I want to talk about something that felt so simple when I first heard it, but it really stayed with me. So I was listening to a video where two women were talking about fear and how so many of us are used to living from it. And one of them asked this question: what if something wonderful would happen? And that question really struck me and stayed with me because I realized how practiced many of us are in the opposite. We are used to thinking, what if this goes wrong? What if I fail? What if I lose? What if something bad happens? What if I'm disappointed again? And we get so used to that pattern that fear starts to feel normal, responsible, and even wise to some degree. But what if it isn't wisdom at all? What if fear has simply trained us to expect the worst? And what if part of healing is learning how to make room for something else? Not denial or fantasy, and not pretending life is easy, but the real possibility that something wonderful could happen too. That is what I want to talk about today. Because I think many of us are not only dealing with fearful thoughts, we are living inside a fear-based expectation. And when that becomes normal, it shapes the mind, the body, our imagination, and the atmosphere we live from every single day. I think one of the most important things to notice is that fear often becomes ordinary long before it becomes obvious. It truly starts sounding like common sense. It sounds like, be careful, don't expect too much, prepare for disappointment, don't get your hopes up, don't relax too much, stay ready for what could go wrong. And after living that way for a while, it begins to feel normal. You may not even call it fear anymore. You may call it wisdom, realism, maturity, caution, and even discernment. But sometimes what we are calling wisdom is actually deeply practiced fear. That is worth sitting with, because fear is not only something that visits once in a while, it can become a daily inner posture. And when that happens, the imagination starts serving fear without even asking questions. We begin rehearsing pain before it even arrives. We imagine rejection before the conversation even happens. We expect loss before anything is even lost. We brace for the worst before life has actually said that is what's coming. That is a real pattern and a real problem, and I think many people are more shaped by it than they realize. This is where it really gets deep. Fear is not only an emotion, but fear becomes a trainer. It teaches the imagination where to go. It teaches the mind to scan for danger. It teaches expectation to lean negative. It teaches us to rehearse disappointment before anything has even happened. And I think that is why the question, what if something wonderful would happen, is so powerful, because it interrupts that whole pattern. It opens a new pathway. It reminds us that fear has not earned the exclusive right to narrate our future. Wonderful is possible too. Goodness is possible too. Help is possible too. Unexpected peace is possible too. A beautiful outcome is possible as well. A new chapter is possible. And for some people, that sounds almost radical, not because it's unrealistic, but because fear has had such a long influence over the inner world. A statement that feels very true to me is, fear rehearses pain before it arrives. And when you really see that, you begin to understand how much inner energy can be spent living in futures that have not even happened. That is exhausting. I think this is important too, because fear is not only mental, It shows up in your body. Sometimes we don't even realize how fear is operating because our body has already started responding before we fully name the thought. Fear can show up as tightness in the belly, a quickened heartbeat, a clenched jaw. I know me myself didn't even realize I was clenching my teeth when I slept until I started having pain in my jaw and went to the doctor for it. But yes, fear can also show us tension in the chest, shallow breathing, or a feeling of bracing oneself for the worst. Sometimes the body is already preparing for something bad before the mind has even finished the sentence. So when we talk about living from fear, we are not only talking about mindset, we are also talking about a practice bodily posture. The body begins to expect stress. The body begins to expect pain. The body begins to prepare for harm. And that means when we start asking, what if something wonderful happens? We are not only interrupting a thought pattern, we may be offering the body a different signal too. A softer signal, a less defensive signal. A signal that says, you do not have to brace for the worst all the time. You do not have to live as though harm is the only thing that knows how to arrive. That is profound to me, because healing may not only be about changing how we think, it may also be about teaching the body that it does not have to live in constant anticipation of trouble. So what does this look like in real life? I think it often begins in very ordinary moments, such as in the morning. Fear starts the day with, what do I need to worry about? What's going to go wrong today? What's waiting for me? A different posture would ask, what if something good is already unfolding today? That does not mean irresponsibility. It means fear does not get to be the first voice every morning. In real life, it could look like before a conversation, fear saying, what if they misunderstand me? What if this gets awkward? What if this goes badly? A freer posture says, what if this brings clarity? What if this softens something in me? What if this goes better than I expect? It could also look like around work, money, or your calling, fear saying, what if this doesn't work? What if I made the wrong move? What if I don't have enough? And we say that with money all the time. Or what if I fail? A deeper faith says, what if provision is already moving toward me? What if this path is still unfolding beautifully? What if the step I took is opening something I can't fully see yet? And also in relationships, it could look like fear saying, brace yourself, or don't expect too much, don't be too open with them. And a different inner life would say, what if I'm safe here? What if I'm loved here? What if I don't need to protect myself before anything has even happened? That is the difference. I think this part really matters too, because when people hear a message like this, they can assume it means ignore what's hard, deny what's real, act like nothing hurts, stay positive no matter what. That is not what I mean. I am not talking about shallow positivity. I am talking about refusing to let fear be the only imagination in the room. That is very different, because life is real. Pain is real. Uncertainty is real. Loss is real. But wonderful is real too. So is grace, mercy, and help. God moving in ways we did not anticipate is real. So this is not about pretending there are no hard possibilities. It is about refusing to live as though fearful possibilities are the only intelligent ones. That's a much healthier posture. Fear is not the only form of foresight. And hope is not foolish just because it leaves room for goodness. I think this matters in our walk with God as well. Because fear-based faith can still sound spiritual. It can sound like, I'm just being careful. I'm trying not to get hurt. I'm preparing myself. I don't want to be disappointed. But underneath it, the heart is still bracing, still expecting pain first, still expecting troubles, still expecting the hard thing before the good thing. And I think God may be inviting us into something deeper than that. Not naive faith, not untested faith, but a faith that can actually make room for goodness. A faith that says, what if God is already moving here? What if I am more supported than I realize? What if peace is available to me? What if I'm not being led toward harm? What if this season carries more beauty than fear has told me? That is not light or shallow. That is spiritual retraining. It is learning how to let faith ask a different question than fear. And sometimes that alone can change the atmosphere. If you want to begin living this more practically, I think it can be as simple as this. When you notice a fearful what if, don't start by arguing with it. Just add a second question. So if fear says, what if this goes wrong? You answer, but what if something wonderful happens? If fear says, what if I can't handle this? You answer, but what if I'm given exactly what I need? If fear says, what if today feels heavy again? Your answer, but what if today carries a grace I haven't seen yet? This is how the difference begins. Not by forcing yourself into positivity, but by refusing to let fear be the only imagination in the room. And that is a powerful thing. Because over time, the mind will begin to soften. The body will begin to unbrace itself. The inner world begins to open, and life starts to feel less like a constant rehearsal for pain. I really think this may be part of healing. Not just feeling better, but learning to live from a different expectation. Because if fear has discipled the imagination for years, then part of healing may be retraining it with gentleness. Not overnight, not perfectly, but steadily. Learning to notice the fear thought, the bodily tension, the inner bracing, the old prediction, and then gently offering yourself another way. A way that says, I do not have to expect harm to be wise. I do not have to rehearse pain to stay safe. I do not have to obey fear just because it sounds familiar. Wonderful is possible too. That is not small, that is transformation. So I want to leave you with this. What if fear has trained us more deeply than we realized? What if we have become so used to expecting the worst that fear now feels normal, wise, or even responsible? And what if part of healing is not only learning how to think differently, but learning how to imagine differently? What if part of healing is also noticing how fear shows up in the body, in the belly, the heartbeat, the breath, the bracing, and gently teaching both mind and body that they do not have to live in constant expectation of trouble? Because the truth is, something wonderful is possible too. Goodness is possible too. Help is possible. Unexpected peace is possible. A better outcome is possible. And maybe the goal is not to pretend life is easy. Maybe the goal is to stop letting fear be the only imagination in the room. Let's say a prayer. Dear God, thank you for the ways fear becomes visible when you shine a light on it. Thank you for not exposing our fear to shame us, but to free us. Show us where fear has trained our minds our bodies, and our expectations more deeply than we realized. Show us where we have been rehearsing pain before it even arrives. Show us where we have mistaken fear for wisdom and gently teach us a new way. Teach us how to make room for goodness. Teach us how to make room for peace. Teach us how to make room for wonderful possibilities without feeling foolish for doing so. Help our minds loosen, help our bodies soften, help our hearts stop bracing for harm. Retrain our expectation in love, truth, and trust. And where our fear has lived in our belly, our heartbeat, our breath, or our thoughts, let your peace begin speaking there too. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for being here with me today, and maybe carry this with you this week. What if something wonderful happens? I pray this video met you at your heart. In my next video, I will talk about the difference between presence and performance. Thanks so much for being here, for watching, subscribing, sharing, and supporting this space. If you'd like to go deeper, you can explore the links in my channel's description, including my website, the podcast, blog, gift shop, sacred digital resources, and join my email newsletter list to stay connected with what we're creating and sharing. And if you're interested in working with me more personally, you can also visit the Work With Me link. These videos are shared for spiritual reflection, encouragement, and entertainment purposes only. And if this video spoke to you, I truly appreciate you liking, sharing, and subscribing. It really helps support the channel and allows for this message to reach more people. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Until then, take care of your heart, take care of your spirit, and take care of you.